Hey guys, welcome to A Film Darkly. I'm your host, Anthony Paceno. And today I got another review for you. I have just come back from seeing 1917. And this movie has like a ton of Oscar buzz behind it. It actually won a Golden Globe for, I think it was Best Drama. Because Best Comedy Musical went to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So Golden Globes aren't necessarily taken that serious. I've heard lots of various arguments. I mean, one of the best arguments is they have two Best Picture categories, and they often throw dramas in with the musical comedy category because there's like no more room in the drama category, and then things like I believe there's only like 50 people that vote, and so just stuff like that. There's a lot of people who just don't make a big deal out of it. Obviously, anyone who wins an award will go up there and act like it's a big deal. It's also sort of a foretelling because sometimes whoever wins a Golden Globe tends to also win the Oscar. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So this might give us like a window into, well, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or 1917 have a chance of winning Best Picture. Um, so I went to see this. When I first saw the trailers for this film, I was in no way, shape, or form like overly excited. It's directed by Sam Mendes. I've personally never heard of him, but I don't always keep my pulse on directors. I keep my pulse more on like what's going on in terms of films, like what the next movies are and things like that. And sometimes I'll find out like what's going on behind the scenes, but I don't always keep my pulse on like who directed what unless that director is very unique. That's usually when I'll learn their name and stuff. It stars Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay. There's also a slew of like other known actors like Benedict Cumberbatch, and Colin Firth. That's the other one, and Mark Strong shows up in it, which I kind of thought I wasn't sure if he was in it. I don't remember seeing his name, but as soon as he showed up on screen, I was like, "Hey, it's Mark Strong." And it's interesting because those three actors, Benedict, Mark Strong, and Colin Firth, have very small roles. Very small roles. The film mostly follows Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay. There's also Richard Madden is in it. Some people are making a big deal about that, but that's a. I mean, people aren't making a big deal. I mean, he's being listed, but again, kind of a very very small role. So, anyways, this film was unique because the way it was shot is it's supposed to be one long single cut. It never really cuts. For the most part, it's true. There is one part though where it's clearly a cut. It is a story cut though. It kind of makes sense why it's a cut. I won't say anything because I feel like it just gives away a part of the movie, so I can't say. But it is technically a cut in the film. It's not a cut though story wise, if that makes sense. So, anyways, so I did think cinematically this was done well. I thought I liked the single cut thing. I liked going from one spot to another. I felt like the movie drummed up drama like it needed to. I felt like the main actors were pretty good, Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay. I will say that neither one of them blew my socks off. I didn't feel like either of them were that good. If I gave them a grade, I would say they were like a B. They're like a B out of your typical grades, or an 8 out of 10 or something. I thought they were good. I just didn't think they were anything special, which might be why they weren't nominated for anything, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, neither of them were nominated. I might be wrong about that. Maybe one of them got a Golden Globe nomination. I don't know for sure though. But the film is still getting all these accolades. People are really pushing it, mostly because of the way it's filmed, and because a lot of people just, they feel it's a really great movie. I thought that there was certain moments you had to suspend imagination, like it not suspend imagination. You had to suspend realism and let imagination take over, because there was a few moments where I was kind of like, okay, how's this happening? I I thought, like, I felt emotional. I felt I felt like the terror. There's a moment where they're leaving the trenches and going into no man's land, and because this is all during World War I, and I was kind of like, ooh, this is interesting, right? But I can't say that, like, it really, I can't say it captivated me in the way it needed to. Um, Chapman played a young kid named, they're both played young kids. Um, it's okay, Lance Corporal Blake and then Lance Corporal Schofield. So there's Blake is played by Gene Charles and Schofield's played by George McKay. And so you're just following them the whole movie, and there's a lot of interesting things that happens, and you do get background as they have conversations and tell stories. But at the same time, a lot is left in the air. And I think that the point of this movie was to do something similar to what Dunkirk did. Dunkirk told a different side of war, where you didn't get to know the characters, you didn't get to know the people, and you saw the story being told from four different I think it was three or four different perspectives. And that's how the movie was told. And you didn't really get character development or anything because you weren't supposed to. This movie kind of tries to do that even more so by following these two kids, from the very start. They're just sitting in a field, and all of a sudden there they go, and they get orders, and then you follow them out, and then you're just following them as they're marching, and following them when they get in a vehicle. You're following them, and then there's action all along the way and stuff, and it's interesting in that sense, because they have this real death-defying mission that easily could have killed them. And so I won't say that it's not a good film. It's definitely a very good movie. Like, it's not a bad movie at all. It's very good. I just don't feel like it's as, or I shouldn't even say very, but it's not as memorable. Is it Oscar worthy? When I think of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, no. When I think of a movie that's not even nominated, Midsommar, no. When I think of Joker, I don't know if Joker is nominated. I can't recall. I know Joaquin Phoenix won a Golden Globe for his role as Joker, as Arthur Fleck. But I don't know if the movie was up. I think it may have been. But, like, when I think of the Joker, I think Oscar worthy. I have a real hard time deciding between those three films that I just mentioned: Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Joker, and Midsommar, and which one was my favorite. Midsommar is not nominated at all, and I think it's just as good as the other two. If in fact, Midsommar is kind of my favorite movie of the year. Was my favorite movie of 2019, basically. There was nothing else that stood out to me as much as that film did. That film really stood out to me. I enjoyed The Lighthouse. Even The Lighthouse, though, didn't stand out to me like that film did. So, I don't know. To me, Midsommar should be at least nominated, but it's not. So, of the movies that are nominated, if The Joker ends up being like an Oscar-nominated film, we've yet to receive those nominations, and we get Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think both those movies are better than 1917. I think they're both better, even when I take into account what Sam Mendes was trying to do, how it was filmed, and I think to myself, like, this is a great cinematic, like, masterpiece in that sense, because it's so different. I can't say to myself, this is a movie that's good enough to get that award. It's just not. The actors are definitely not good enough. They're just not. Arthur Fleck is way better. Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio as it's Cliff and I always forget the other character's name, but is it Cliff or Clint? Oh man, I don't even remember. Anyways, I'm just being stupid. Anyways, either way, those are better actors. They're better actors, right? So, in my opinion, there's just so much better actors out there. I mean, why Florence Pugh wasn't nominated for Midsommar is beyond me. She was fantastic in that film. I don't get it. I don't get it. So I'm already mad at the Oscars because they didn't nominate any of the movies I think they should have. I mean, how do you snub William Dafoe for The Lighthouse? Robert Eggers' film. No idea. But aside from that, do I think 1917 gets any sort of accolade or any sort of respect for doing any sort of achievement or a nomination for their roles for the roles in 1917? Any of the actors, George McKay or Charles Chapman? I say no. Neither one of them are just good enough. They're just not. And Joaquin Phoenix, let's be honest, that guy deserves it. He deserves it no matter what, because his Joker was very compelling. And I know everyone's still in love with Heath Ledger, but Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, the Arthur Fleck Joker, that's a memorable Joker. I mean, so memorable, I don't even know if, he's even more terrifying. I know there's people out there who've watched the Joker a ton of times. They love it. I love it too. But that movie was so deeply disturbing for me, I've only been able to watch it once. That's no disrespect to the film. That's no disrespect to anybody who's seen it more than once. If you can do that and the movie's enjoyable to you in that much, hey, good on you. It was just enjoyable to me in a way where it was still an experience that I don't necessarily want to go through again. I probably will watch it again eventually, but I don't know when. It's out right now. I could get it digitally, but I don't know if I care to watch it again. I think it's a great film. I just think it's a disturbing film. So, and anyways, which interestingly enough, Midsommar is also a very disturbing film, but for some reason I'm fine with watching that one again and again. I don't know why. So anyways, in the end, 1917 is not a bad film in the slightest. I would say it's like a 9 out of 10. It's one of those movies where, or not a 9 out of 10, maybe more like an 8 out of 10. It's one of those movies where it's like you definitely watch it and you're like, I just watched a great movie and I experienced something fantastic and fun. But there wasn't any superior acting in it, which is what would take it down a notch for me. And the story itself, to me, just isn't compelling enough. It just feels more like two kids that are kind of wandering around like Mr. Magoo and are just trying to get to some destination, just falling into all these traps along the way. And to me, it's at its core, when I think of the fact that that's what this movie is, that's when I get that downer. Because immediately when that movie was finished, I felt a sense of disappointment. But when I thought back on the movie, I knew it was good. I'm like, this is a good movie, but I'm disappointed. And I think it was just because of the Oscar buzz. And interestingly enough, the movie ended up being what I first predicted it would be when I watched the very first trailer and thought to myself, this is looks decent, looks fun, looks cool. And seeing the movie, I now realize that original thought, had I had that going into the theater as opposed to the Oscar buzz thought, I would have enjoyed the movie more. Because I would have been like, oh, this kind of exceeded my expectations. Whereas hearing the Oscar buzzing going in, I had just way higher expectations than the movie was able to deliver. And that's where it fell apart. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Like I said, about an 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5 out of 10. You should see it. It's definitely worth seeing. It's definitely a good movie. Go see it. But yeah, try not to listen to all the buzz because the buzz isn't everything. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Bye.